Hello, everyone. We are so glad you are here to join us today with the Better Business Bureau, bringing to you a Mission Central message about reporting unclaimed funds in this webinar. We're very excited to have you gain these skills and insights that are necessary for your day-to-day and year-to-year business functionality. With us today, we have three excellent presenters. We have Amy Shellhammer, George Gladden, and Kelly Lister. Amy began her career with the Division of Unclaimed Funds as the Audit and Compliance Manager. She also managed the internal audit team and worked with contract auditors on multi-state unclaimed property audits. In her current position, she is responsible for managing the division's financial accounts, fiscal reporting, and accounts receivable. George Gladden is the Compliance Manager of the Ohio Division of Unclaimed Funds. He has 19 years of experience auditing for the Ohio Department of Commerce, where he has conducted more than 1,000 unclaimed fund audits. When asked why he does the work he does for the Ohio Division of Unclaimed Funds, it's because he believes in its mission of reuniting Ohioans with their lost and forgotten money by educating companies of their reporting responsibilities under the law. As legal counsel for the Ohio Department of Commerce, Division of Unclaimed Funds, Kelly Lister oversees the development and enforcement of division policy affecting legal programs, proceedings, and operations. She provides legal counsel and advice for the division on claims administration, public record protection, contracts, proposed legislation, policy development and implementation, and prepares cases for litigation. Kelly is also responsible for pursuing the appropriate remedy for cases involving fraud and/or bankruptcy, and serves as division liaison with county, state, and federal courts and other government agencies. She acts to ensure holders are compliant with their reporting obligations and that Ohio's unclaimed funds law is properly and uniformly enforced. I myself am Jessica Hamlin. I'm the Communications Director at the Better Business Bureau here. And next slide. And what we'd like you to know is that we are a new Better Business Bureau. We are focusing on bringing wonderful things to businesses and emphasizing for consumers the need to always look for the sign of a better business. The BBB seal, the sign of the better business, in a market saturated with companies vying for customers, BBB accreditation gives consumers confidence that they're dealing with an ethical and vetted business. This BBB accreditation seal shows a business's commitment to integrity, ethical practices, and customer service. You can learn how to join the BBB community of trustworthy businesses today at bbb.org. Next slide. We believe in the power of trust, and this is one of the reasons we are very grateful to be partnering with the division. It also embodies the power of trust. It adds to our community, and it also emphasizes the BBB as a community-based resource, a trusted advisor, and a partner in business. Our mission is always to be advancing trust in business. We firmly believe that businesses who embrace trust as a core principle, they see growth in their employees, customers, community, and in their bottom line. BBB believes in the power of trust to grow people, businesses, and communities. Next slide. We also represent the community. You too, as a business owner, not only are a business owner, but also a member of the community. Often there are scams that are out and can prey upon our consumers and you yourself as a consumer. Take a moment when you can, if you spot a scam, see a scam, report it, tell us about it. We do research them, we do filter them up to the Attorney General's office, we do advocate for our consumers and people like you. Next slide. So we'll leave you with the thought to always look for the sign of a better business. And next slide. If you're interested in accreditation with the Better Business Bureau, go to bbb.org/get accredited. And if you have a scam that you're wondering about or need to do some research or simply report it, bbb.org/scam tracker. Thanks so much, and we very much hope you get a lot out of this presentation for unclaimed funds.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Kelly Lister. I'm Division Legal Counsel with the Department of Commerce, Division of Unclaimed Funds. On the screen, you're going to see contact information for myself, George Gladden, our Compliance Manager, and Amy Shellhammer, our Finance Manager. Please ask your questions in the Q&A that is provided in this presentation, or you can contact us using the information provided on the screen. Please know we will show this same contact information at the end of the presentation as well. Next, I wanted to speak with you about today's agenda. First, we are going to discuss the history of unclaimed funds in the state and how it came into operation in all 50 states. The Ohio Revised Code, more specifically Chapter 169, which constitutes Ohio's unclaimed funds law. Record retention responsibilities for potential holders of unclaimed funds in the state of Ohio. A particular subcategory of unclaimed funds, which just came into existence in 2021, identified as attorney unclaimed funds. Want to discuss with you in some detail about what constitutes a dormant account. Additionally, want to talk with you about statutory obligations about notifying account owners, those individuals who are the reported owner of unclaimed funds you're holding. Then we're going to have a better discussion with you to educate you on how to report unclaimed funds and additionally identify some pressure points, some problem areas, reporting issues that we have encountered with holders over time. We're going to talk about the filing of a non-report and the reason for it. We will review for you the reporting deadlines in the state of Ohio, how you go about filing an extension for your report, the consequences of not filing an unclaimed funds report, and the ability to enter into a voluntary compliance agreement to bring yourself into compliance with Ohio unclaimed funds law. Finally, we're going to identify resources for you so you can educate yourself about unclaimed funds and rely on them when trying to satisfy your statutory responsibilities under Ohio's unclaimed funds law. So first, why is there a division of unclaimed funds? The Chapter 169 of the Revised Code was first enacted in 1968. It is essentially for holders of funds. If you're a business or an individual, actually, who is holding funds in which you have no ownership interest, there is a prescribed period of dormancy. It's set forth by statute dependent upon the property type. At the expiration of that period of dormancy, there is a legal obligation to report money that doesn't belong to you, to the state, to hold in trust, to be claimed by their rightful owner. Where does this come from? What is a little bit of the history? When I first joined the division, I was very interested to learn that this dates back to feudal times, where there were fiefdoms, where lords would have large tracts of land and they would have individual families that were responsible for cultivating different parts of their kingdom, for lack of a better word. Well, as I think many of us who have had some history understand that in the Middle Ages, there was not uncommon that there were plagues that would wipe out entire families. Well, when that would happen, the Lord didn't want any barbarian to come into that particular tract of land and take it over. Rather, it was the rule of law then that would all revert back to the Lord who managed the kingdom of properties to take possession of the lost and forgotten funds of those family, that clan that used to manage that particular piece of their land. And then it would be up to the Lord to then make sure that that property was distributed for the common good or to the eventual persons who assume responsibilities for that particular fiefdom. Next slide, please. Ohio Revised Code Section 16901 defines unclaimed funds as any money, rights to money, or intangible property where an owner has not generated activity for an extended period of time. This is an annual obligation. Your reporting obligation is an annual obligation. There is an annual responsibility to review your books and records to identify funds in which you have no ownership interest, funds that don't belong to you. So necessarily, it's very important that you maintain records in conformity with the law. In Ohio, it's required that holders, anybody who potentially could be a holder of unclaimed funds, must retain records for 5 years beyond the applicable period of dormancy. The particular category of unclaimed property that you hold, whether it be wages or it be an uncashed check or it be a refund that's due your customer, the category of unclaimed fund determines how long that property is dormant before it is properly considered reportable to the Division of Unclaimed Funds. The reason for that being is simple. For instance, with a category such as wages, you expect someone is going to be looking for compensation for their hard work in a relatively short period of time. And for that reason, the period of dormancy is a year. Where there are other items of personal property, like a traveler's check that you may purchase and then throw in a drawer for a number of years, expecting to use it over time for various trips that you take. And for that reason, the period of dormancy is much longer. It's 15 years. So based on that, it's 5 years plus the applicable period of dormancy based on the property type. Retained records are identified here on the screen, and there are all these forms are readily available on the division's website. It's important that you understand that there is the right of audit with the Division of Unclaimed Funds. Obviously, the responsibility of our administrative agency is to enforce the provisions of Ohio Unclaimed Funds law, and as a necessary consequence of that, the legislature has given us authority to audit holders of holders who may potentially be holding unclaimed funds to determine their compliance with the law. And for that reason, adhering to these record retention requirements is very important. As I mentioned earlier, effective April 12th of 2021, there was a new category of unclaimed funds identified. These are termed attorney unclaimed funds. By statute, they consist of IOTA accounts, which are attorney trust accounts where they hold client funds, IOTA accounts, which are generally going to be escrow accounts, often associated with real estate transactions, and then unclaimed residual settlement funds, where there is basically a pot of money set aside as part of a settlement of a lawsuit with a variety of named claimants or participants in a class action. And at the end of the period of distribution, there's money left over. Those funds likewise have been identified as attorney unclaimed funds. What happens to these new funds? Well, by statute, the division is authorized to loan these funds to the Ohio Access to Justice Foundation. It is an entity charged with responsibility for supporting civil legal aid and access to justice for the underserved population in Ohio. These monies are, as I said, loaned to them because Ohio is a custodial state, which means the state of Ohio does not own these monies, but rather holds them in trust. And for that reason, when we loan them by statute to the Access to Justice Foundation for their use, they too are liable to return those monies in the event a rightful owner of those funds files a claim and recovers those funds from the Unclaimed Funds Trust Fund. Next slide, please. With this, I'm going to hand the presentation over to our compliance manager, George Gladden.
Thank you, Kelly. Good afternoon, everyone. I just wanted to pause for a moment. We did have a question in the Q&A, and the question was, are we able to file reports, paper reports this year? So the answer is we're moving toward fully electronic reporting over the next few years, and we are encouraging everybody to get signed up on the Ohio Business Gateway and to report there until we have other options available. But until we are at fully electronic reporting, yes, you can file paper reports using forms for reports with funds due, and you will be able to request a paper form if you are unable to report through the Ohio Business Gateway. So with that being said, let's get into reporting, everything you need to know about reporting. So everybody in Ohio, all businesses in Ohio, I should say, are required to report to the Ohio Division of Unclaimed Funds annually, with the exception of 501c3 hospitals and political subdivisions. And so you're required by statute to review your accounts on a yearly basis to determine if you have anything dormant or reportable as an unclaimed fund. And so what are dormancy periods? And Kelly kind of touched on this already, and that's the maximum amount of time that you can hold a particular kind of property or unclaimed fund before it becomes dormant and potentially reportable to the state of Ohio. We get a lot of questions about reporting those early. Can you report a property early before it becomes dormant? And the answer is yes, and that's covered under the Ohio Revised Code 169.11. So long as you follow the due diligence mailing guidelines, yes, you can report those early. You're required to report annually, even if you have no unclaimed funds to report. And that's given by the Ohio Administrative Code 130110-3-03B. And we call that a negative or a none, or sometimes a zero report. And once you do report, you are relieved from liabilities. So once those funds are sent over to us and they're under our custody, we never take ownership of those funds. So we have money going back to 1968. But once you do, you are held harmless. So even if you're sued over that, those funds that got turned over to us. And it's also written into the code that if you do not file your unclaimed fund report, you may be assessed fines and penalties. And that's under Ohio Revised Code 169.12 and Ohio Revised Code 169.99. So reporting is a four-step process. So on the next slide, we'll talk about identifying dormant accounts. So like I mentioned, the first step is to go through your accounts to determine if you have anything that is dormant. So this would involve going through your bank reconciliations, taking a look at your outstanding checklists. Most of the time, the dormancy periods that you may encounter will probably be 3 years. So look for checks that are older than 3 years, unless they're payroll checks, in which case there's a 1-year dormancy. If you go to our website, unclaimedfunds.ohio.gov, and download our annual reporting guide, there's a list of the different kinds of unclaimed funds with their dormancy periods in the back. And so you can also, or should also, go through your accounts receivables to see if you're holding any customer credits or patient credits, depending on the type of business. There's a 3-year dormancy on those as well. But for an example, let's take a look at a law firm. So on the next slide, let's talk about the kinds of unclaimed funds that they may be holding. So most law firms, attorneys are required to hold a trust account for funds that they hold for fiduciary, escrow, and trust fund purposes. They may also encounter wages, and as I mentioned, there's a 1-year dormancy period on those, or customer credits and refunds, and there's a 3-year dormancy on those. So let's take a look at fiduciary. So that's defined under Ohio Revised Code 169.02, Section J, as monies, rights to monies, or other intangible property, and any income or increment on them held or owed by a holder, which is a fiduciary for the benefit of another. So in this case, they may be held in an interest on trust account. It's a special trust account set up for title insurance companies. Law firms may be holding an interest on lawyer's trust account, or there may be other trust accounts or escrow accounts. So there's a 3-year dormancy period on these kinds of unclaimed funds. But if we take a look at the next slide, they may be holding things like I mentioned, payroll with a 1-year dormancy. Now there is an exemption. Any payroll less than $50 are exempt from being reported as unclaimed funds in Ohio. And that's the only time the dollar amount comes into play in this way. Everything else, even if it's a penny, once it becomes dormant, is subject to being reported as an unclaimed fund to Ohio. But there may be other kinds of unclaimed funds, such as royalties or oil and mineral proceeds, payments to landowners, payments to investors, monies owed or under non-qualified pension and profit sharing plans, all of which have a 1-year dormancy period. Other things that other businesses may encounter may be profit sharing, may be things like banks with safety deposit boxes, Could be for real estate. There's a special trust account for that. Commission checks, refund checks. Like I said, there's a list of those in our annual reporting guide. So that's the first step, is to go through and identify things that are dormant, and to eliminate those items that are exempt. So I already mentioned one of the exemptions. Other exemptions include gift cards, funds that have an outside of Ohio address for the owner, and also there's a business-to-business exemption which eliminates payments to vendors, tangible goods and services for wholesale trade. All right, so that's the first step. All right, so the second step is, once you identify those items that are dormant, is to go through and see that, and go through and do the due diligence mailing. It's only required for items $50 or more. Anything less than $50, you're not required to do the mailing by statute. However, those items are reportable as unclaimed funds. So with the due diligence mailing, you're required to send out a notice of unclaimed funds form or an equivalent letter, which we have our form OUF8, which is on our website at unclaimedfunds.ohio.gov. You fill out the appropriate places on the form, send it to the last known address of the owner of the money with a self-addressed stamped envelope. Anything between $50 up to $1,000, you can send it out first class mail. Anything $1,000 or more, you're required to send that out certified mail with a return receipt requested, and you can charge up to $20 against the account to pay for the actual cost of the mailing. And that is the only time that you are permitted to deduct anything for an escheatment fee or for any other fee related to reporting unclaimed funds. So you're required to give the owner of the funds 30 days to sign that form and return it to you. And if they do, it's not unclaimed, in which case you could either reissue the check or keep the credit on account for up to 3 more years, or however long the dormancy period is before they become dormant again, and potentially reportable as an unclaimed fund. One important note I should mention about dormancy and activity is that it has to be owner-generated activity. So it could be the last date of service, the last date of payment, could be communication about that account, but it has to be owner-generated. And I'm going to pause right here for a moment. We have a couple of questions. The first of which are custodial and minors accounts exempt from unclaimed funds reporting? No. However, given the nature of the accounts, dormancy does not begin until the minor reaches the age of maturity. And then then the clock starts there. So it would be, I think it's 5 years after that. And I think Kelly could probably correct me if I'm wrong, or Amy. And the next one is, are 501c3 churches required to file an unclaimed fund report? Yes, they are. So the only 501c3 entities that are exempt from reporting are hospitals. And with that, for the next step, sure, go ahead.
Just jump in for a second.
Sure.
There could be a distinction to be made between minor and custodial accounts. Obviously, minors, as you stated, they have to reach the age of minority. There could be circumstances in which there are custodial accounts that have nothing to do with the age of the beneficiary of the account, and in those instances, the period of dormancy would apply.
Thank you. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy to talk more about reporting.
I do want to, thank you, George. I do want to add to, when you do your due diligence mailing, the next slide, make sure that it's a self-addressed stamped envelope back to you, not to us, because we've received a few and it really should go back to the business or the holder that has the fund so they can reissue it. So now you've done that. You've looked through your stuff, you've identified what you need to report, you've sent out the due diligence mailings, haven't heard anything, okay, you're ready to report. We basically have 2 options. So it's dependent upon how you're going to pay for it. That determines which option you can use. The first option we have is the one that's more updated, I want to say more using of technology. It's with the Ohio Business Gateway. In this case, you would have to, we do have videos on there that you can use you need to add your account with the gateway if you do not have one already. Get that set up. And then you want to prepare a NAPA file. NAPA stands for National Association of Unclaimed Property Administrators. And this is basically a format that all the states are used to seeing in the template. There's a space for the last name, space for the first name, email addresses for the second owner, the first owner. It identifies these spaces for you. I normally suggest to people, if you're going to use a NAPA file, these are usually for things that, for properties that you have over 25. Somebody asked if they can file a paper report. Yes, but it gets to be time consuming on your part and on our part if you fill out a paper form for 200 owners. So it's better to create a NAPA file. In this case, though, there are two vendors that normally produce a NAPA file, HRS Pro and UP Exchange. And I believe there's links on our website to them, but they charge a fee for that. But you prepare your file, whatever it may be, or you create a PDF version of the forms that you have, and you will add that to your payment on the Ohio Business Gateway. Now, there are certain things that you have to remember on the gateway. We only take credit cards and we only take ACH debit. ACH debit are authorized payments through your account. So if you have a blocker on it, or it needs some sort of approval with your bank for it to go through, we do have a debit blocker number that you should provide your financial institution. So that way the payment will go through. Otherwise, you might hear from my section, like, we got the file, but we still need the funds to go with it. And the report is not complete without both. Next slide, please. The next option is if you're paying by check. So we do not accept wires at this time. We do not accept ACH credit. As I said, it depends on how you're paying. You can have check, or you can have ACH debit or credit card. Option 2 deals with the check. We do have a secured website for people to upload their file. This has been created, which is great, because now we don't get all the CDs that people used to burn to the CDs and send us the passwords and that kind of stuff. Now you can actually securely upload your information. This allows a little security, more security, I think, from just sending a CD through the mail, which we used to have a lot of. So you will upload your form. We ask for information on your email address, your phone number. If there's a problem with the file, we can contact you. But the email address is important because once that is submitted, you will get a confirmation. So if your email address that you put in there is bad, you'll never know if it was confirmed or not that we received it. And then you might have to reach back out to us. But you should get a response that you have successfully uploaded the file. And next slide, please. This is an example of that secured website. So it can be done on Apple devices or Android devices. We ask for this, as I said, the business name, the email address, the FEIN number, Social Security of the business. We also have where there are certain things that this website does not like that we had to put in there. It will not, if it, there's special characters, there's certain characters, it will not take it. You might get an invalid file name on it. You might get, let's see, if it's too big, you might get an error on that. But mostly, it'll identify on the website what the problems, what you need to have in there. If you do have a question, though, there is our email address and there is our phone number to call us. If you're having problems with this website, we can help with that. The email address on here is unfdholders@com.state.oh.us, or call our main number at 614-466-4433, and we'll get somebody to help you with that. Okay, next item. So some of the issues that we have with the files that were sent or the papers or the paper forms that were sent, the total that is on the report or on the paper does not match what your check is or what your charge amount is or your ACH going through. These need to match. The Ohio Business Gateway is just an avenue for us to receive the report. It doesn't do a matching for it. So we don't identify it until we actually go to process the report. And then that's about the time you'll start hearing from us that these did not match or something's off on this. So you'll have to let us know what that is. We also ask for the full owner detail. As much as you can give us, this helps us identify that it is the proper John Smith that's getting this versus Alan Smith that should have it, or anything on the address that's different, or the birth date, the social security number. If you have that information, that is important to help us identify who this goes to. Then we have the nature of funds code. This basically helps us tell us the dormancy of it. And then this is in the reporting guide as well, if you want to know what those codes are, which can be accessed on our website. It also helps to identify if somebody was calling us at, what is that? Oh, hey, this should be a check. There's a refund check that should be due, and that identifies to them, oh, I know that does belong to me. So then we also have an ownership code. Is it just a single owner? Is it a joint owner? Is it a joint owner with survivorship? These are the kind of information that would help identify who's the proper owner of this. So those codes are also on our website in a table that you'll see. The company name, the company FEIN number, their contact is missing. Again, this helps us if there's a question on the report, even also on a question if somebody comes to claim it and it's a vague description as well as the owner name. This helps us contact you back and say, do you have anything more on this? Is this the proper owner of this? That helps us as well. The owner detail is not in the proper field or column. We do have a space that has email addresses. We have internet companies that's all they have is the email address. Some of them, when they first were set up, that's the only thing they were requiring. Now there's more information usually provided, so we will have probably a name, an address, and a phone number. But back, since we've had this since 1968, 69, sometimes that's all we have is just the email address that you can prove that this was yours. So I'm not sure how that's going to happen, but that is possible. Next one, please. Other reporting issues that we have. Now that we're trying to transition to more of an electronic environment, there are multiple places to give us these files. There are, if you file via ETM, there is an upload for that that we can grab those files. There are CDs that people will send us in. They're also uploaded on the secured website, and then we'll turn around and put it on the Ohio Business Gateway. Please limit how many places you're giving it to us, because we'll think it's a new separate report, and we'll wonder where the payment is for that. So we might want to eliminate that as well. Lag time between somebody over in maybe your company in New York is submitting the report, but somebody in Texas is actually paying for it. Hopefully the lag time between the two payments, between the payment and submission, is a little shorter. It becomes problematic if it's becoming 6 months. Sometimes they put it out there and they haven't paid on it, and it's been a year. It's not complete until we get both. So there should be submission of both by the due date. The checks need to be payable to us. Sometimes we get checks paid to the state of Ohio and actually get sent to the Department of Taxation, and they'll cash it. Never got to us. We've had some sent to, oh gosh, all over the place. Attorney General's office. They're not paying attention to which vendor they selected in the state of Ohio. It needs to be sent to us. Unclaimed Funds, Department of Commerce. And then the report submission email, like as I said back when on the reporting option 1, if you give us a bad email address, you may not ever get the notification that it was successful filing. So it's important to double check your email address to make sure it's a valid one. Next. Earlier, George told you about that you need to file a report, even if it's a non-report, otherwise known as a zero report. Basically, it's told us that you've done your due diligence. So the due date on the zero non-report is the same due date. You're going to end up with the other reports. So be sure to identify what the company is that you're filing the non-report. It's easier to file it on the Ohio Business Gateway because that one is a couple clicks and you're done. Whereas if you mail the paper, sign it, mail it, make sure it gets to the postal service on time. Those are the ones that, that's why we're trying to eliminate less paper as well. But I do understand some people still prefer that or can do that easier. But Ohio Business Gateway is an easier option for the non-reports once you are set up. And we do have videos to help you set up, so just letting you know. Next. And now I believe I'm turning it over to George regarding the deadline.
Thank you, Amy. We do have some questions here that are kind of piling up in our Q&A. So let's pause for a question or two. If customers at our retail stores return merchandise without a receipt, we offer a merchandise credit card, no expiration date or fees, and good only at our stores for merchandise. Can we treat these as exempt like credit or like gift cards? That's a good question. Kelly, what are your thoughts on that?
Hi, George. Yes, I had just replied in the Q&A, and I wanted to refer to that. Now I lost it. My question, and this is in response to the question about the retail card in the, because my question is now gone. If it has, my question to the requester is there any residual cash value in the event that you issue these cards that is good for goods and services at your affiliated retail entities? If I come in with a $50 basically credit card that you had issued me and I purchased something that was $48, is there any residual value? Do I get the $2 cash back in the event that that happens? I know some major retailers who do that, and that is important for purposes of complying with our statute.
Okay. Thank you.
So the short answer would be, if that is not the case, and if it is only redeemable for goods and services, and there is no expiration date on that card, and it is good for only goods and services at a group of affiliated merchants or single merchant, then it would qualify for the exclusion that's provided for in 169 from the definition of unclaimed funds in section 169.01.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Let's see, next question here is, if the owner of a bank account is deceased and you have no joint owner or beneficiary information, do you mail an OUF-8 notification? If so, do you mail it to the deceased owner at the last known address? And the answer is yes. You send it to the last known address on record, and hopefully it'll make its way to the decedent's estate. So if somebody authorized to sign on that person's behalf, such as an executor or executrix, next of kin, is able to sign, something with power of attorneys is able to sign on behalf of that deceased person, then yes, that still counts. So yes, you do still have to do the due diligence mailing. And let's do one. Go ahead, Kelly.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Thank you. And then let's take one more. Do we have to?
Wait, I wanted to add on something to what you just said. It's important that you realize, even if you know that an account owner is deceased, so long as the authorized state representative continues to be active on the account, it prevents a finding of dormancy.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Okay, and so this next one, do we have to give them multiple options to send the signed letter back, such as mailing, faxing, or emailing? And the answer is no. You are only required to mail the notification and make sure that you are required to include a self-addressed stamped envelope. We will accept a signed notification if you had faxed or mailed it, but to conform to the letter of the law, you do have to mail that if you don't have any response from emailing or faxing.
But if the owner responds to your notification and they do it in any form, whether it be email or a phone call or a fax, that constitutes owner-generated activity, which then tolls the period of dormancy such that it would no longer be properly reportable to the division as unclaimed funds.
Okay.
So even though you tell them to send you back the assigned form, you know, in the enclosed envelope, if they communicate to you in other ways and engage in owner activity, affirming that they have continuing interest in these funds, that's what we want to do by our due diligence notification, is we want to make sure that the owner is aware of the funds, and that then they would no longer be properly reportable, provided that they continue to engage in activity on the account.
Thank you. All right, so let's dive into reporting deadlines. All right, so as I mentioned, all companies in Ohio, with a couple of exceptions, are required to report annually. Life insurance companies are required to report by May 1st for anything dormant as of December 31st of that prior year. All the other companies are required to report by November 1st for anything dormant as of June 30th. So for the 2023 report for most of the companies, that's due by November 1st. And then it would be anything dormant as of June 30th, which means that if it were say a credit refund check, if it was issued prior to June 30th of 2020, then it would be dormant, potentially reportable as an unclaimed fund. All right, so moving on to the next slide. If you are approaching that filing deadline, however, and you find that you need more time, you can request a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day, or 120-day extension on our website. You see the address there. It's apps2.com.ohio.gov/UNFD/extension. So long as we receive the request for an extension by the due date, you will receive the extension. However, if it's after the due date, then we do not grant extensions. Now, if you're not sure if you need an extension or not, say for instance, you did the due diligence mailing and you're still waiting to hear back, I would recommend requesting the extension. And if you're not sure how long of an extension you need, I recommend requesting a longer extension. So what happens if we don't file? As Kelly mentioned, you may be selected for an audit per Ohio Revised Code 169.03G Section 1. And they are involuntary, which means that if you receive an examination entrance letter from me, then you are required to go through the audit. There's no negotiation. It's the law. So one of our in-house auditors or one of our contract audit companies would conduct the audit, and then they would review your records for anything that should be reported, and then they will advise you of how to be compliant, answer any question you have about reporting or unclaimed funds otherwise, and then at the end, you would end up filing a report. It covers the last 10 reporting cycles or years, and so that would catch you up. You may also be assessed fines and penalties of up to $500 per day for each day that you do not file your unclaimed fund report, plus 1% interest on those funds. So that money racks up pretty quickly. So that's given under our Revised Code 169.12 and our Revised Code 169.99. Now, if you want to avoid the possibility of an audit or potential fines and penalties, we have on our next slide a great solution. We have a voluntary compliance agreement program whereby you can enter into an agreement with us to report all of your unclaimed funds over a specific period of time. We typically request 10 reporting years. Once you do, you are held harmless from fines and penalties. It's one of the factors in determining if we're going to audit someone. It's typically a random selection, but we also take a look at reporting history. So if you've been under a voluntary compliance agreement, we consider that for our audit selection. So there are lots of great reasons, and it's pretty simple. You go to our website. unclaimedfunds.ohio.gov to the reporting section, and there's a section for the Voluntary Compliance Agreement Program. You can download all the information and the form to fill that out. And once you sign it and submit it to us, we will review it. And once it's fully executed, then you have 60 days to file your unclaimed funds, and it catches you up, and you don't have to worry about those fines and penalties. And like I mentioned, it's the easiest way to become compliant, and it's actually the program's taking off. Go ahead and jump in, Amy, if you like. No. Okay, so last year, I think we had $16,156.39 by this time last year of dollars that had been reported with the program. This year, we're at 2.3 million, and we're expecting more by the end of our fiscal year at the end of June. So highly recommend, if this is of interest to you, or if it happens to be an interest to one of your clients, if you happen to be an accountant or an attorney, definitely we recommend the program. You can contact me with the contact information at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy. She has some reporting resources for you.
Thank you, George. No, that's a very good program. We've had a lot of businesses that have been able to catch up on their reporting that way. So it's a good resource tool. Speaking of resource tools, we have on our website, as I stated before, we have videos out there that will help you with the gateway. We do have the various forms on there that you can use, as well as the reporting guide and the tables that will help you the forms or the file the forms and file it on the gateway, whichever way you want to do it. So we're continuing to find new ways as much as we can. So if there's something that changes on there, I'm sure we'll work on changing the videos for you, but we try to put the newest and the best that we have available to us out there for you. Next one, please. Here are a couple email or websites for you to look at. I mentioned the NAPA website for the templates, the Ohio Business Gateway website. This is managed by the Department of Administrative Services. As I said, we use it as a tool, but it is not managed by us. There's missingmoney.com. I suggest you look at that every year. Not only are you filing funds for people, but you might have funds out there. So it's a good way to look every year for that. And unclaimedfundsohio.gov, this is just Ohio's funds reported in Ohio that you can look for if we have that. Thank you. Next slide. The future of reporting. We are looking into a new system. I'm not sure how that's going to change how availability on how to report. We are trying to get more technology and quicker and faster for you, and allow you also to hopefully manage your own reporting more so than having us make sure it gets coded or put in there. You might be able to see when it's in there and what the process steps are. That's a hope that we have, but we'll see what it turns out to be. So please stay tuned, and I appreciate you working with us as we transition to becoming more electronic. That is it. There are the email addresses and the phone numbers should you have any questions. And that's all we have. Are there any more questions?
There are tons of questions, so let's get through as many of these as we can. All right. Let's see. Our vendor to vendor payment, are they exempt from filing unclaimed funds? No, you still need to file unclaimed funds if you're a wholesale business, but those actual transactions between your business and, say, a vendor are exempt. So those are not reportable.
Let me jump on for a second.
Sure.
Business-to-business transactions are exempt under certain circumstances in the state of Ohio. However, as I tried to make clear earlier in the presentation, maintaining records to evidence you qualify for the exemption means that you must be able to produce a purchase order and an invoice to demonstrate the nature of the underlying transaction in order to avail yourself of an exemption from reporting. That's true with any exemption. If you want an exception to the rule, then you've got to establish that you qualify for that exemption. And for that reason, it's important that you maintain the records if you intend to use that as an exemption from your reporting obligations.
Next question. Can you please review when minor dormancy begins? So for minor accounts, begins when the minor reaches the age of majority, and then the clock starts then. So there's a 5-year dormancy period. So if there's no owner-generated activity on the account after 5 years, once the minor becomes an adult or reaches the age of majority, then those items are dormant.
And in contrast, for those custodial accounts which do not involve minors, they're subject to the normal dormancy rules and triggers of no owner-generated activity. And that would be on the part of the custodian on the account, not necessarily if it, for instance, if it's for a person who is unable to manage their own affairs later in life, for instance, then it would be no activity on the account by the individual responsible for administering that account.
Okay. All right. Next question. I missed the part about owner-generated activity. Is the last owner-generated activity date the date from which you calculate the dormancy period? Yes, that is correct. All right. Next question. So just to clarify, if the account is under 18, we don't start the clock. So we covered that. That's correct. Let's see. We have found for the last 3 years now, the post office has not been processing certified mail properly. The carrier has been signing the cards or not signing them at all. They're using COVID as the excuse. Why are we wasting almost $8 for each of these mailings? It's written into the law for the certified mailing requirement. As far as the irregularities, I recommend that you contact the post office and or there, I think there's a police force or inspector general for the post office. Kelly, is there something that you would like to add?
And also, please recognize that as a holder of unclaimed funds, because of the amount of unclaimed funds that you're holding, you're required to send notification using certified mail. You are authorized by law to recover the expenses associated with that mailing from the unclaimed funds that you're holding.
Thank you. Could you possibly clarify the business-to-business exemption? If a university purchases classroom supplies from a vendor and the vendor does not cash the check payment, is this reportable? Is it only retail wholesale transactions that count for the exemption? We kind of touched on this one already. It's a vendor payment, so in this case, the purchase for the classroom supplies would fall under the exemption, and it's wholesale trade transactions.
Yes, it was originally meant to cover those transactions between businesses where they are supporting each other in producing, in generating their service or in producing whatever goods it is that they market and sell. As far as the definition, I think as we mentioned earlier, it's important if you want to avail yourself of this exemption that you show the underlying invoices and purchase orders for the transaction between the two business entities. It has been my experience that there are some holders who simply want to show that that they're a business and that the owner is a business, and that's sufficient for them to exempt all the funds from reporting with absolutely no information provided about the underlying transaction. And in that case, it would not properly be exempt if you cannot produce the evidence of the underlying transaction in the form of an invoice or a purchase order.
Okay. Amy, I think these next two are for you.
Yeah.
Okay. So this question is, I practice immigration law and many of my clients do not have social security numbers. Is this a problem?
No, give us as much information as you can. Last known address, if you know their birthday, that would help us as well. So no, we've received some.
Yeah.
Yeah. When filing online, we can send a check payment. We only pay via ACH credit versus ACH debit What credit card payments do you accept? We accept all the major credit cards on the Ohio Business Gateway, that is. So it would be MasterCard, Visa, Discover, and I believe American Express. I don't think we take diners or that kind of stuff. So let us know if it ends up, it's a third-party processor for those credit cards. So let me know if you end up having a problem. Filing online, the second option where you can upload your report to the website, that's where you would send a check. Okay.
All right, next question. How do we proceed if an account is past due of the dormant period? For example, paycheck not cashed, an accountant just told us it's been several years. Go ahead and do the due diligence mailing, and if you don't have a signed notice of unclaimed funds form or an equivalent letter, then that item is reportable. So go ahead and report that to us. And then once you do, it gets it off of your books. And then, like I said, we hold it indefinitely until the owner comes to claim it.
George, do you think this would be a
Yes.
good time to talk about voluntary compliance agreements for those holders that just learned of their reporting obligations?
Oh, sure. So if you do happen to have some of these older items for items that should have been reported over several years, and if you say you haven't reported over some of the years, or if you've underreported, like in this case, I would definitely recommend our voluntary compliance agreement program, whereby you can enter into the voluntary compliance agreement with us, report those items to us, and then you are held harmless from fines and penalties. And it's a factor that we consider when taking a look at audit selection. So holder reporting history. So definitely recommend you go to unclaimedfunds.ohio.gov.
And
We've got a couple.
additionally, you'll be received of all your record keeping responsibilities for those funds in which you have no business ownership interest.
Okay. All right, Kelly, I think this one's for you. Are you required to mail unclaimed funds notification to owner? Can you do phone calls or emails?
The statute requires a mailing. Currently, the legislature has not updated it to reflect that. And for that reason, we ask holders to conform to what the statutory requirements are.
Okay. Let's see, it's the deadline for the zero report for a 501c3 Humane Society on November 1st of each year. Yes. Yes, it is. Let's see. We're coming up here almost an hour. Do we have a little leeway to go over? Okay. What if we discover a death past the 3-year period from a Social Security number search? Do we still do the due diligence even though it is already past the due date? Yes. You still need to do the due diligence mailing. For everything $50 or more. If it's less than $50, you're not required to do the mailing. Those items are just reportable as unclaimed funds. Let's see. Can you go over the dormant time frame? June 30th of what year? No, once it becomes dormant, then you need to do that due diligence mailing and report it to the Division of Unclaimed Funds. It's the law. It's Unclaimed Fund Law, which is governed by Ohio Revised Code 169 and Ohio Administrative Code 130110.
And George, if I could just build off that, what they're talking about when you're talking about the June 30th is for purposes of unclaimed funds, reporting is based on the fiscal year, which is July 1st from one year to June 30th of that following year. But then that becomes reportable by November 1st following the June 30th reporting period termination. I may have just confused matters more. But the fiscal year ends on June 30th. And then for that fiscal year, for instance, fiscal year 2023 will end June 30th. And then you would file your 2023 report November of 2023.
Correct.
Unless you're a life insurance company. And then we can talk about that offline. I'm teasing.
It's still a 2023 report. It just isn't due until May 1st of the following year for life insurance companies. But the dormancy period would be December 31st, not June 30th for that. So hopefully that helps.
All right, it looks like we have about 3 minutes left in our meeting time period. Are there other questions?
you do still have some questions. And as a reminder, if we don't get to your question, or if you have questions after we finish up, you can contact us at the email addresses there. You can also reach us at 614-466-4433. All right, so last few questions here. Did I hear you correctly that my outstanding funds letter must include a self-addressed return envelope? Did you also say I must provide a stamp, not just the envelope? Yes to both. Let's see. If you have filed several items last October and realized you missed one dormant check, does this require a voluntary disclosure process, or is there an easier way to report that one item? Amy?
You can actually file another report for that same year. You don't have to include the rest of it. We've received some fines, some later on that they missed, so we'll have like a second report for 2022. So it's possible just to add another report. Just do another one.
Okay. And I think that's going to be our last question. It said earlier you said you could file early. Were you referring to filing an account early as dormant, or were you referring to actually filing the report with the state early? So I was referring to reporting the item prior to it becoming dormant. You may not report your unclaimed fund report early. The earliest that you can report for the November 1st deadline is July 1st of that year.
But it doesn't excuse you from doing your due diligence prior to reporting to make sure that the owner is aware of what you're going to intend to do.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you found this information useful and it gives you some good next steps. Please feel free once again to reach out to Amy, George, or Kelly with any of your unanswered questions. And if we can help you anyway at Better Business Bureau, reach out to us at bbb.org. Have a wonderful day.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.